Hi, everyone. I suspect most people probably can't see this, so I'll maybe just point it out. I'm wearing a maple leaf on my lapel. And the reason why I wear this is because of the job that I do. I work for the Canadian Consulate General here in Hong Kong, and I want people to know that I'm Canadian. So I guess I probably shouldn't be surprised that when I'm walking down the street, or if I show up at an event like this, that I have people who come up to me and say, hey, I'm Canadian. I think the surprising part, though, is that in a place like Hong Kong, just exactly how many Canadians there are, in fact, around us. I thought maybe I would do a small experiment, and so hopefully people play along. I know it's getting a little bit late in the day, but I'm wondering if all of those that are in the room that are either Canadian citizens or have studied in Canada or have a relative, an immediate family member, a parent, a child, a brother or sister living in Canada, if all those people could just stand up. Thank you. You can sit back down. The reason why I did this, and I promise you that I didn't stage this, but there are over 300,000 Canadian citizens living in Hong Kong. When you consider the fact that Hong Kong is only a place of a little over 7 million, that's a fairly substantial proportion of the population here. In fact, that's a fairly conservative number. A 2010 survey that was done by the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada back in 2010 surveyed households in Hong Kong, and that number is probably a lot closer to 550,000. A lot of those are originally Hong Kong residents that moved to Canada prior to the handover, but then subsequently returned and maintained their Canadian citizenship. So in fact, there's a lot of dual citizens that are living here in Hong Kong. In addition to that, at a minimum 295,000, there's about another 150,000 people living in Hong Kong who are not Canadian citizens that studied in Canada. They might have done their university education there or studied at the K through 12 level. And then on top of that, there's probably about another 1 million people living in Hong Kong that actually have an immediate family member in Canada. So I guess the question then that someone like myself has to ask myself in the job that I do is, what do we do with all of those Canadians exactly? This is actually the largest population of Canadians living anywhere in the world other than the United States. And so I guess for me, my job, just to give you a little bit of background, is I promote all things Canadian when it comes to business. I help Canadian companies, I promote investment into Canada, and generally I just brand Canada as an innovative and a competitive place to do business. And so for me, my main interest is finding out exactly how can I make use of that group of Canadians that are living here in order to advance our interests. In Hong Kong, we have a lot of famous Canadians. Some of you might recognize in terms of looking at some of the photos that are up here on the screen, there's a wide range of personalities there. You have some of the tycoons that are on the Forbes list of the richest individuals living here in Hong Kong. You also have those from the entertainment industry. A surprising number of Miss Hong Kongs have been Canadian citizens, including the most recent Miss Hong Kong. And so it actually represents a pretty good cross-section of different industries. In addition to some of these famous Canadians, we also have a very large business community. We have a very large Canadian Chamber of Commerce here with about 1,000 members. We have 4 different Canadian curriculum schools in Hong Kong and Macau delivering the Alberta and the Ontario curriculums. We have a number of Canadian University Alumni Associations, over 20 here. In fact, for a lot of Canadian universities, this is actually their largest population of alumni living anywhere, even outside of other provinces. And so we've really got a group of who I guess I would consider to be potential allies in terms of the work that we try to do. Asia is a very important place for a lot of businesses now. It's where a lot of the growth in terms of the global economy is, and certainly for Canadian business, Asia is very important. And Hong Kong plays a really important role in that. And in a place like Asia, relationships really matter. So it's just not enough for a company to come and to be looking to do business. They need people to make introductions. I have a great team that I work with at the Canadian Consulate. I have a team of 15 people. They're all extremely hardworking and talented. But the reality is, if I have 300,000 Canadians that are also out there in the population, how can they help? I don't know how many of you will recognize the photo that's up here on the screen. This is a photo of Michael Chan, who is chairman of Café de Corral. Most of you that are living here probably have eaten at Café de Corral before. You're familiar with the size of the business. Michael Chan studied at the University of Manitoba. He studied to be an urban planner. And eventually he went on to work for the Alberta government. He eventually came back to Hong Kong, took over the family business, and remembering how much he missed Chinese food when he was living in Canada, he ended up actually investing at a later stage in a company called Manchu Wok, which oversees a number of fast food franchises serving Chinese food in Canada and also in the United States. If you've been to Café de Corral recently, you'll also know that right now they're running a hot pot promotion. And if you haven't had it, I certainly encourage you to go and try it. They're using Canadian beef. And so this is a really good example of where we've actually been able to leverage some of the connections that we have with someone that has very substantial Canadian business and personal ties in order to be able to, in this case, sell a Canadian food product. So this is the kind of thing that we're really trying to work with. I guess the question is, with such a sizable population, are all of those individuals necessarily the same? Do they have the same connections to Canada? And the answer is no. Some of these individuals have very close personal and professional ties to Canada. Others, for the most part, don't have really strong linkages. And so what we're trying to do is to try to identify, and I actually thought the presentation this morning talking about social capital was really interesting, is try to identify who really are those main strategic partners that we want to be working with. There are a variety of things that we're doing in order to try to connect with Canadians here in Hong Kong. This is a picture last year of our Foreign Affairs Minister, John Baird, with Richard Lee. He's presenting him with the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, which is a medal that's awarded in order to try to recognize the significant contributions of Canadians abroad. So this is an example of something that we're trying to do in order to be able to try to maintain those significant linkages that we have with Canadians, in order to be able to recognize as well the contributions that they're making. This is something that's a little bit more fun. Every year we do an annual beach cleanup where we try to bring together members of the Canadian community, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian University Association, and we basically clean up a beach in Hong Kong. So it's a bit of it's a fun event, and it's about community building. And the idea of it, too, is that we're also hopefully doing something that also projects Canadian values. In this case, doing something that's related to environmental protection. So this is an example of maybe a type of event that we might try to do in terms of trying to bring together that Canadian community. I guess other examples of things that we might do. In the Second World War, there were a number of Canadian soldiers that lost their lives defending Hong Kong. It's actually a rather tragic story. In that there were a number of soldiers from both Winnipeg as well as Montreal who turned up here. They were essentially fresh out of recruitment, had had very little training. Unfortunately, their supplies had accidentally been diverted to Manila. And so they really had nothing that they could use in order to defend themselves. And many of them actually lost their lives or ended up dying subsequently as prisoners of war. And so every year, we actually recognize those contributions as part of a ceremony that we do with the Canadian community. This is another example of the type of event we might do. In addition to that, we're obviously engaging very closely with some of what I consider to be the different pockets of Canadian communities here in Hong Kong, and really trying to build out some of those strategic partners in terms of the work that we do. More recently, and I know that there have been a number of discussions about this already today, we've been trying to reach out in terms of that broader community using social media tools. And so, for example, last year, we launched a Facebook page for Canadians in Hong Kong and Macau. It's still at a fairly early stage, and I'm, especially after the last presentation, a bit reluctant to even tell you how many likes we have so far. But it is a bit of a work in progress, and we'll certainly be trying to reach out to more and more Canadians as we go. In addition to that, we also have a platform for promoting Canadian food products here in Hong Kong. We have a Facebook page for that as well. We have an iPhone app, soon to be an Android app. And the purpose of that is that if someone's looking for Canadian wine, Canadian beef, or maybe a particular type of cookie, that they'll know where to find that in terms of restaurants and stores here in Hong Kong. These are all examples of different things that we're trying to do in order to try to effectively bring out our footprint in terms of the work that we're doing. I thought maybe just to give you some examples of maybe what the results of all of this might be. And I thought rather than giving you some maybe, I guess, somewhat random examples of Canadian success in Hong Kong, I thought I might give you just an idea of what my day was like this morning on my way here. Probably like many of you, I took the Airport Express. And so when I got to the Airport Express, I was greeted by a small group of TEDx staff who had helped me get my ticket. And the first one that came up to me said, "By the way, I'm Canadian, and I'm from Ottawa." And I said, "That's great, because later on I'm going to ask you to probably stand up in the audience, and hopefully you'll help me out." Then I got onto the Airport Express, and I found myself sitting on a Bombardier train car as I made my way in. And then when I got off at Asia World Expo, I saw the Pacific Coffee. And Pacific Coffee, it's not actually a Canadian company, but it is actually owned by a Canadian. And moreover, they also have a number of Canadian food products on their menu. So I got my morning coffee on the way in. These are just some examples. I saw Avril Lavigne being promoted because she has an upcoming concert that's coming out here, also another Canadian performer. All that to say is all of this work wouldn't be possible in terms of the warm introductions that a lot of very helpful people will provide in a market like this where relationships really matter. So I guess, with that in mind, I guess for those of you that are Canadian in the room, certainly I would encourage you to think about maybe how you might help in terms of the work that we do. We're always happy to build out new connections. And for those of you that aren't, it might be an interesting way just to think about some of the relationships that you have and what you bring in terms of the work that others might be doing. Thank you.